Indeed, at least part of our global culture is influx. Welcome back, everyone, to Echoes of Change Culture Influx podcast, episode number 2. Without losing any time, let us begin. Before we go to the more dense part of this episode, I would like to take a moment and express the following with you. There is something we rarely stop to think about. What is it? For most of human history, please imagine that. Nothing important, it's like everything that was important was not written down. It wasn't. Not because people were incapable of doing so, but because remembering was mostly more important and it was a skill, a responsibility. Laws were not stored in books, they lived in voices. Boundaries were not drawn on maps, they lived in stories. Promises did not survive because someone somehow archived them, but because someone somewhere had learned them so precisely that they could not forget. Memory was not private, it was a social phenomenon. It was performed, it was corrected as it was spoken, and witnesses as it unfolded. In such societies or worlds, to remember accurately was not only a cognitive task, it was a moral one. To forget wrongly could fracture families, it could fracture contracts, destabilize entire communities. Even every society before, long before it built like the monument, the buildings, the laws, the offices, these societies too had to answer one quiet question. Which was it? It was, for example, where does our memory live? Does it live inside people? Does it live inside ritual? Does it live inside the object that we use or around us? For a very long time, the answer was clear, or at least the answer was one. Memory lived in trained bodies, in voices capable of carrying genealogies across centuries, in rhythms and formulas designed to expose error before it settled, in public performances where truth was not simply declared but tested. And this worked, by the way. It worked actually remarkably well. But it carried also limits because the human body's age, context drift, societies grow beyond ranges of a single voice, and at a certain scale, remembering everything correctly became no longer heroic but fragile. You have to imagine. Now that we have, let's say, emphasized that part, I invite you for 2 minutes. Please take a step back, sit if you stand, or stand very well and steady, and take one step back and close your eyes. Close your eyes for 10 seconds. And for a moment, imagine having access to no record, like no document, no written proof, no ID card, no contract, no nothing. Nothing is written down. Everything is inside your head or someone else's head. Imagine that everything that matters, who owns what, for example, who promised what to whom, what happened before I was born, before you were born. Imagine that all of that survives only if someone remembers it correctly. And imagine that you are never alone when you remember. Because in such societies, memory is always being listened to. Like you have to remember out loud. And by the way, while you're doing so, someone is there to correct or to confirm what your memory is. And this is not nostalgia. Now you can come back. Please come back. It is how things were actually. Because before writing, cultures built sophisticated infrastructure to protect memory from error. And when those infrastructure began to strain, humanity crossed a threshold that could never be reserved. Having established that communication is a foundation to any civilization, this is episode number 1. It is there in the bio. You can watch it or listen to it. With this episode, we turn to a specific transformation within that story. Here, today, the focus is not communication in general, but the condition under which memory itself began to change and change its form. We move from society that depended only on embodied memory, socially regulated memory, to the earliest attempt to let's say, externalize the meaning, externalize the memory. First, through structural oral system, then through marks, tokens, script, tablet, we will see that. And the task here in this episode is to understand that transition. So you might not understand everything perfectly, but understand the transition that happened and why it happened. Not as a story of progress, but as a response to scale, complexity, and the limits of human presence. What follows here in this episode is an examination of how memory was structured before writing, and why writing became possible only after those systems had already been pushed to their limits. So, I would like to start or to launch today's episode with a quote from André Leroy-Gourand. He observed the following: long before memory was stored in object, it was carried in as a skill, in the body, the voice, the gesture. Only when that capacity was pushed to its limits did humanity began to build memory outside of itself. The question that remains is whether, having externalized memory, we still understand what it once made possible. Please look up to the screen. Here you can see the references in the written article. You can also find it there in the audio version. I try to put it in the bio. And this is not the only edition. There are several editions about this book. I invite you to read it. I invite you to also read other authors or researchers that have done their research in this topic. Without further ado, please allow me to welcome you to this second episode of Echoes of Change. Indeed, our global culture is partially, at least, in flux. My name is Giraldine Nelly Bekono, Nelly for short, and let us dive into it.
Thank you. Thank you, Nelly. Now, let's take it from here. A time when memories stepped outside the body. For most of human history, the future was held together by something simple but demanding: a trained voice. Laws, debts, family lines, and agreements were not written down. They lived inside people, inside disciplined memory systems, careful repetition, and public correction. Remembering was not casual. It was a responsibility. Entire societies built reliable systems out of human bodies long before they built archives. In West Africa, griots preserved political legitimacy and settled disputes by recalling precedent in public performance. Accuracy was protected by repetition, music, and the community itself, which listened, corrected, and confirmed. In South Asia, Vedic reciters pushed precision even further. Memory was engineered through layered repetition, breaking words apart, recombining them, braiding sound forward and backward, so errors could not hide. These were not performances for expression. They were human error-checking systems. But as societies grew, memory faced new pressures. Villages became cities. Cities governed people who never met. Food had to be tracked, labor organized, authority sustained across distance and time. Oral memory could be extraordinarily precise, but it depended on presence. At a certain scale, relying on bodies alone became fragile. That is when memory began to move outside the body. The shift did not start with stories. It started with counting. Small clay tokens represented cattle, oil, or grain. They were sealed inside clay envelopes to prevent tampering. Soon, the impressions alone were enough, pressed onto tablets. Meaning no longer depended on a voice in the room. Categories and quantities now existed as marks. This was proto-writing, not language yet, but externalized trust. In ancient Europe, these marks evolved into proto-cuneiform. Writing's first function was not poetry or philosophy. It was administration. Who owed what? Who worked where? In what amount? Lexical lists trained scribes to think in standardized categories. Images slowly became symbols. The city learned to coordinate itself at scale. Other societies solved the same problem in different ways. Egypt developed a mixed system, sound signs, word signs, and determinatives that visually clarified meaning. When the same consonants could mean white or silver, a visual classifier resolved the ambiguity. This was not inefficiency. It was designed precision. In Shang China, writing was embedded in ritual accountability. Questions were carved onto bone. Cracks were produced and interpreted. Predictions were written down and later verified. Writing here did more than remember. It closed the loop between decision and outcome. The archive became evidence, and evidence became authority. Much later, another threshold was crossed: the alphabet. The Phoenician script recorded consonants efficiently. Greek scribes did something radical. They reassigned and used consonant signs to record vowels. The result was the first full alphabet, one that captured spoken language closely enough to lower learning barriers. Literacy spread. New forms of thought followed: extended prose, law, philosophy, and public argument. This episode traces that arc. From voice to token to tablet to script to alphabet. But it is not a story of progress. It is a story of choices. Each memory system answers a different question. How much precision do we need? How far must memory travel? Who is allowed to speak with authority? Oral systems rely on social correction. Objects anchor trust materially. Scripts embed authority institutionally. Alphabets widen participation. Seen together, one truth emerges. The form of memory becomes the form of society. Change where memory lives, and you change who counts, who commands, and who participates. None of these systems is superior in itself. Each reshapes how knowledge moves, how power settles, and how imagination expands. This series begins with memory under pressure and follows it as it invents new forms to hold the world together. For this topic on oral communication, we would like to start with West African griots, which we characterize as memory as an institution. Every society must solve one of its basic problems. One of them being how to make the past authoritative in the present. In many parts of the world, the solution was writing, for example. Laws carved in stone, contracts inked on paper, archives sealed behind walls. Across large parts of West Africa, the solution was different. It was institutional, and it was human. What we call griots emerged across the Western Sahel and Upper Niger Basin as a response to early political complexity, long before writing became a dominant technology of governance. For starters, let us look into their origins and early consolidation. The institution commonly referred to as the griot emerged in the Western Sahel and Upper Niger Basin as a response to early state formation and lineage-based governance in societies that did not rely on centralized writing for civic memory. While its deeper roots extend into pre-imperial Monde social organization, griothood crystallized into a recognizable hereditary office during the rise of the Mali Empire in the early 13th century, particularly under the reign of Sunjata Keita between the year 1235 and 1255. Oral traditions associated with the Sinjata epic recall figures such as Bala Fasakui as foundational court orators, not as lone inventors, but as exemplars through whom older practices of memory keeping, praise, and arbitration were formalized. From this period onward, Griot families became socially designated custodians of genealogy, precedent, and reputational history, operating alongside ruling lineages rather than within them. Their authority derived precisely from this separation. Griots did not govern or inherit land. They preserved the narratives, obligations, and boundaries that made governance intelligible and legitimate. Now that we know where they came from, we can continue with their expansion, adaptation, and contemporary presence. As Mande political influence and trans-Sahelian trade networks expanded between the 13th and 16th centuries, Griot institutions diffused across a wide cultural zone, adapting to Wolof, Songhai, Fulb, Sonic, and Serer contexts while retaining their core logic of hereditary custodianship and public accountability. Islamic scholarship entered this world from roughly the 10th century onward, introducing Arabic literacy and Ajami writing. These textual traditions developed alongside, rather than in replacement, of oral archives. Colonial disruption in the late 19th and early 20th centuries weakened courtly patronage, but did not dissolve Griot authority, which recalibrated toward weddings, mediations, markets, religious ceremonies, and later radio, recordings, and public festivals. Today, Griot practice remains active across Senegal, Mali, Guinea, Gambia, and beyond. Transmission continues within families, adapting to contemporary media without losing its foundational social role. Far from being a relic, Griothood persists where lineage, reputation, ethical obligation, and dispute resolution still matter, demonstrating that its endurance lies not in the preservation of form alone, but in continued relevance to the organization of social life. We cannot finish this section without a definition. Yes, it might seem boring, but indeed, we need definitions. We need to put words on things and situations because then we have a basis to discuss, talk about them, and most importantly, reflect them in our lives. With that being said, straight to the definition. Across Senegambia, the Western Sahel, and the Upper Niger Valley, griots are often described misleadingly as performers. The figure commonly glossed as the griot denotes a hereditary social role centered on the preservation, interpretation, and transmission of collective memory. Griots are entrusted with genealogies, historical precedents, reputations, and ethical codes, and they make this knowledge present through structured combinations of speech, music, and ritualized performance. This tradition does not rely on inspired improvisation or individual recall alone. Within griot systems, accuracy is neither incidental nor assumed. It is actively produced through long-term apprenticeship within lineage lines, through codified musico-poetic forms that constrain and scaffold speech, and through public performance contexts in which audiences listen not as passive spectators, but as knowledgeable witnesses. Precision is constructed step by step, socially, musically, and institutionally. Accordingly, this section argues that West African griot traditions constituted a system of reliable orality, an archive without paper that nonetheless maintains law, history, and legitimacy through lineage, pedagogy, and public audit. Question: how exactly was reliability institutionally sustained? Up front, we can say it was via operating principles. Let's look into it. Before turning to specific cases, here are 4 mechanism structure on how griot authority operates. Number 1, lineage and status. Only certain families are authorized to carry memory, and that authority is socially recognized. Number 2, apprenticeship. Here, accuracy is trained through disciplined, repetitive instruction over years. Number 3, musical and formula. In this case, instruments, cycles, and verbal formula partition structure memory in retrievable ways. And to finish, number 4, public verification, which includes that audiences actively correct, endorse, and guarantee what is said. Theory is good, actually very good, but a good practical example wouldn't hurt, as Nellie would say. So, we shall do exactly that. Example number 1. Griots being responsible of transmitting lineage, status, and patronage. Now imagine this. As the sun lowers over Kingaba, you find yourself standing at the edge of a courtyard as a griot of the Kuwait line begins to perform. A small circle forms, tightening as more people arrive. Elders of the Keita clan sit nearby, listening closely. Names unfold, fathers, mothers, marriages, alliances, until something subtle happens. A great-grandmother's name slips out of place along one genealogical branch. Before the griot can continue, several voices rise from the crowd. The performance pauses. The griot listens, nods, accepts the correction, and resumes, rethreading the genealogical chain without hesitation. No offense is taken. No authority is questioned. The moment passes smoothly, and the recitation continues. From the outside, this might look like disruption. In fact, it is the opposite. What you are witnessing is the mechanism through which accuracy is protected. The interruption is not a challenge, but a form of collective oversight, a way oral law is regulated in public space. This scene rests within a wider social framework. Among Mande peoples, griots belong to the Nyamakala strata, hereditary, often endogamous craft lineages whose authority is sustained through long-standing relationships with noble patrons. Patronage supports speech materially, but it also shapes what can be said and how far it can go. In neighboring towns, joking kinship extends this licensed speech further. A taunt, "You bean eaters," directed at an allied lineage is not insult but ritual release, opening space to surface tensions without inviting conflict. The takeaway here would be, griot authority functions as contractual memory. It binds because it is rooted in lineage, shaped by patronage, and maintained through public correction, remaining credible precisely because it is always open to scrutiny. Example number 2. Griots responsible for gendered archives. Furthermore, imagine this. It is just past midnight at a wedding in Bamako. Courtyard lamps cast a soft glow as music settles into a steady rhythm. Then a jelly muso steps forward. Her voice carries neither casual joy nor theatrical excess, but something more disciplined, an authority that is both widely recognized and carefully bounded. She begins with praise drawn from the bride's maternal lineage, naming women, marriages, and inherited virtues. Gradually, the tone shifts toward the groom and the obligations that now bind him. Blessings are offered, threaded with warnings. No one interrupts. The surrounding silence signals shared understanding. Her position authorizes forms of truth-telling that others could not safely deliver. This is not personal opinion, nor entertainment alone. It is licensed speech, exercised at a social threshold. Across Mande societies, griots are documented as co-custodians of genealogies, guardians of marital ethics, and mediators of social tension. Their authority often becomes most visible at moments where speech has lasting consequence: weddings, funerals, reconciliations. The career of Candia Kuwait makes this authority unmistakable. A patron's gift of a small airplane, often cited for extravagance, matters less as spectacle than as recognition. It signals moral, reputational, and material capital accumulated by a woman acknowledged as Ngara, a master, within Mali's performance field.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for this piece. Before we move to the next one, I would like to really kind of take a minute to think about this deep dive we just did on West African Griot tradition, because what we presented today is not even one tenth of that history. That history is deep, it is dense and layered and incredibly rich. And it plays the interesting part is also that it plays a key role in understanding how human communication has developed across the globe, across different eras, right up to what I would argue what we are witnessing today. So I truly encourage anyone listening to go and read, do research, keep learning, because this is one of those fields where every layer opens onto many more. And now that we have had this intense journey on African Griot tradition, I would like to suggest that we take a break, a small break, because there are still a lot to be discussed, to uncover. Let us therefore take a small break, and during that break I would like to share a music piece that it is, I would argue again that it is presenting different type of instrument, of lyrics, of rhythm, African rhythm. In case you enjoy, the links are on in the bio, completely free, no subscription and required. Just follow the link and enjoy the music, and that was it. So yes, let us have this small break, and we come right back and continue with the next one. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Welcome back after this beautiful piece of music. Please do comment. How did you find it? Did it make you think about African melodies? Maybe yes, maybe not. Do not hesitate to comment right below in the comment section. Without further ado, let us now continue with the next types of oral communication that were also as dominant as the African griot in the part of the world where they were practiced. Maybe someone can guess? No, not Nelly. No, because she did the research, she knows. Okay. The next ones are actually few ones. Egyptians' hieroglyphs, proto-writing, and proto-cuneiform. So, let us dig into it. Shall we? When we talk about writing, we often imagine language frozen into symbols. But historically, writing did not begin as literature, narration, or expression. It began as a technical response to a problem: how to preserve accuracy, responsibility, and memory in societies that had grown too complex to rely on human recall alone. To understand this, we need to look at four closely related systems: proto-writing, proto-cuneiform, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and a group of undeciphered administrative scripts. Together, they show how early civilizations engineered memory long before alphabetic writing existed. Let us begin with proto-writing. Proto-writing emerged in Southwest Asia as early agricultural and proto-urban societies expanded beyond the scale of face-to-face exchange. When surplus accumulated, when labor was coordinated, when obligations extended across time and distance, memory became a collective risk. The earliest response was not language, but objects. Small clay tokens, simple, standardized counters, whose role was to represent quantities of grain, oil, livestock, or labor. Not too much, but extremely important as you can imagine. In this context, one token equaled 1 unit. Counting was performed through structural recording per category and not per inscription. Meaning that, for example, if 1 token equal 1 unit, that was it, nothing more or less, and surely not depending on situations or occasion. The system was concrete, embodied, and reliable, precisely because it did not depend on recall. As transactions increased in scale, these tokens were sealed inside hollow clay envelopes, known as bullae. The seal protected the count from tampering. To verify contents without breaking the container, token shapes were pressed onto the exterior surface. Here, representation begins, not sound, not speech, but trace. By the late 4th millennium, the objects themselves were removed. Their shapes were pressed directly onto flat clay tablets. Tokens became marks. Quantity became abstraction. Counting became record-keeping. This was proto-writing, a durable administrative memory that preserved categories and quantities without encoding language. Crucially, proto-writing did not record stories, laws, or speech. It recorded accountability. Now, away from the abstract and straight to an example, as Nelly would say. Imagine a steward counting stored grain by assembling 10 identical clay tokens on a surface. Each token represents 1 fixed unit of barley. Quantity is secured by the physical presence of objects, not by remembering numbers. As transactions became more complex, these tokens were enclosed inside sealed clay envelopes called bullae. The seal secured the count against tampering. To allow verification without opening the container, the shapes of the tokens inside were pressed onto the exterior surface. Example: tokens representing sheep and grain were sealed inside a clay bulla. Before sealing, the steward would have had to press the shapes onto the outer surface, allowing later verification without breaking the seal. By the late 4th millennium, this system was transformed again. Flat clay tablets bearing impressed marks replaced physical tokens entirely. The 3-dimensional objects were abstracted into 2-dimensional signs. Counting became record-keeping. Information could now persist across time, space, and institutional transfer. At Uruk, one of the world's first true cities, these practices crystallized into proto-cuneiform between roughly the year 3350 and 3000. Writing here was an instrument of governance. The earliest tablets did not describe events, neither did they preserve myth. They recorded ration allocations, labor assignments, livestock counts, textile production, and institutional inventories. When writing came and fully got established, it helped to stabilize categories, to track responsibility, and allowed administration to operate across personnel and time without oral escort. Proto-cuneiform signs represented things, professions, and measures. Numerical systems varied depending on the commodity being counted. Grain, labor, land, and time each carried their own numerical conventions. Calculation was inseparable from context. This was not mathematics in the abstract, it was calculation as practice. Authentication mattered. Cylinder seals functioned as signatures, rolled across tablets and containers. Authority resided not in a single medium, but in a coordinated system. clay, sign, seal, archive. This system spread unevenly across Mesopotamia and beyond. In some regions, it persisted and evolved. In others, such as proto-Elamite Iran, it remained administratively effective yet historically silent, later undeciphered. Survival depended not on intelligence or complexity, but on institutional continuity. An example: a tablet lists barley rations allocated to a group of workers. A commodity sign is paired with numerical symbols, and the tablet is stored for later auditing. Different numerical systems were used depending on what was being counted. Grain, labor, land, and time each employed distinct numerical conventions. Calculation was contextual rather than abstract. Writing stabilized practice, not theory. Authority was reinforced materially. Cylinder seals functioned as institutional signatures. Rolled across tablets and containers, they authenticated records and made tampering visible. Writing, seal, archive, and storeroom function together as an integrated administrative ecology. Example: a sealed tablet travels from a storeroom to a supervisor and then into an archive. The seal guarantees integrity without oral explanation. Proto-cuneiform spread unevenly across parts of Mesopotamia and neighboring regions, remaining largely administrative until later generations gradually introduced phonetic elements. At this stage, it was writing before language writing. A parallel but structurally distinct solution emerged along the Nile. Now we turn to Egypt, where writing took a markedly different path. Egyptian hieroglyphs emerged in the late Naqada III period, around 3300–3200, directly within royal and administrative contexts. From their earliest attestations, especially the inscribed labels and sealings of Tomb Uj at Abydos, writing in Egypt was already fully graphic, visually rich, and semantically layered. Unlike Mesopotamia, Egypt did not move from tokens to bullae to tablets. Instead, hieroglyphs arose within a pre-existing visual culture: rock art, emblems, ritual symbols, and elite iconography. Writing did not grow out of counting objects. It grew out of symbolic representation. From the beginning, Egyptian writing served three intertwined purposes: administrative control, royal legitimation, and ritual cosmological mediation. Hieroglyphs were understood as meta netjer. Writing was not merely practical, it was sacred, authoritative, and ontologically meaningful. Egyptian hieroglyphs were never aimed at minimalism. Instead, they formed a mixed logo-consonantal system combining phonograms, logograms, and determinatives. This last element is critical. Example: two identical consonantal spellings appear in an inscription. One ends with a mineral determinative, the other with a light determinative. In this case, it is important to note that meaning was resolved here visually, not phonetically. This system of redundancy allowed hieroglyphic writing to remain stable for over 3 millennia. Meaning endured not because spelling was minimal, but because classification was explicit. Not all early writing systems followed this path. Across different regions, several graphic systems emerged that remain undeciphered today, including Proto-Elamite in southwestern Iran and the Indus signs in South Asia. These systems were embedded in administrative practice and appear on tablets, seals, and containers. Proto-Elamite flourished roughly between the year 3100 and the year 2800. Indus signs appear from about the year 2800 to the year 1900. In both cases, inscriptions were short, highly standardized, and context-bound. They recorded accounting and authorization rather than narrative statements. Example: an Indus seal bearing 5 signs is pressed into clay sealing a container. The sign sequence identifies authority or ownership, even though it does not encode speech. These systems demonstrate that writing can function effectively as administration without evolving into phonetic or literary scripts. Their disappearance reflects breaks in institutional continuity rather than cognitive limitation. Taken together, these systems reveal a shared principle. Reliability was never inherent to a medium. It was structured through redundancy, supervision, institutional responsibility, and verification. Before we close this episode today, we would like to mention other types of oral communication that were not developed here in the video version. These are fully detailed in the audio podcast version as well as in the written article. So, please refer to these one for further input about the following types of oral communication. First to be mentioned would be the Vedic recitation, which demonstrated how sound itself could function as an archive. Through disciplined apprenticeship, calibrated phonetics, and layered repetition, exact texts were preserved for millennia without relying on writing as primary authority. Secondly, the Shang oracle bone writing showed yet another path. Writing as a closed loop of decision, divination, and verification, binding authority to empirical outcome. Across these systems, the insight converges. Reliability was not inherent to any medium. It was structured. So, these types of oral communication being mentioned, we can finish by saying this durable knowledge emerges where redundancy, institutional responsibility, and verification are carefully organized, whether through sound, clay, image, or script. What endures across millennia is not writing alone, but the systems we build to hold ourselves accountable to truth. Now, let us finish today's journey. What we have
Thank you. Thank you so much for digging into this section. Before we move to the closing part, I would like us to again gather together and briefly think about what we have discussed throughout this section. Because we saw through this section that writing did not begin as a language fixed on a surface. It began as a response to a practical pressure. What does that mean? At some point, societies, humans were in front of situation they could no longer overcome based only on communication. You remember oral communication? It was that type of communication where we needed only the Griot from West Africa, for example, or the Vedic recitation, which is very much detailed in the written article I have published, etc. At some point, society grew so fast and so much so that oral communication alone was no longer enough to solve the problem. They needed another solution. And I would say, after brainstorming, they came to the knowledge or to the solution, to the conclusion that writing might be the solution to overcome whatever challenge they were facing back then. So we moved on and we saw that in Mesopotamia, for example, this type of early writing took the form of object. Which object? Clay tokens, bullae, or later on tablets. Here, the most important thing was to make sure that quantity was securely and physically documented, later on visually, and also institutionally. And we moved then to the next part where we saw that proto-writing and proto-cuneiform did not preserve speech or on stories at first. Again, here we saw that writing did not begin because people wanted to tell stories. They were already doing that with the oral communication. Writing emerged also there because people needed to fix a problem. They needed a solution to fix a problem. Here also again we see that it was about responsibility. They needed to make sure who owed what, to know or to document that who owed what, to whom, when, who was responsible for what, how, where, when, etc., etc. So making sure that responsibility was traced on was the first task of writing here. So Then we moved to Egypt, although in Egypt writing a very different roots had, but here also it emerged within a very rich visual and ritual culture. Here, from the start, writing combined administration, royal authority, and cosmological meaning. So, in ancient Egypt, and beyond the system, we saw that effective writing did not require phonetic language at all. For example, what I'm doing currently, right now, I'm speaking, I'm talking, I'm speaking, I'm saying things like I'm using my mouth to make words come out of it and to basically speak. While I am doing so, I don't necessarily need to write anything. And otherwise, when I write, I don't necessarily need to be speaking or to be talking. So these are two different things, and we see that here writing did not also require back then the phonetic language at all. We unfortunately mentioned, we not unfortunately, before I put unfortunately, sorry for the English, we saw that writing systems such as proto-elamite or the induced sign, they unfortunately disappeared. Yes, there I can put unfortunately. They've disappeared not because they were no longer important, but because the structure on which they were built or the practical problem they were thought about to be the solution disappeared at some point, and consequently they also disappeared over the time. You can still find documentation about them, research, very rich research about those type of writing, but unfortunately they are no longer, let's say, known by the wide public. So together, taken all of these cases together, one point is clear. Which one is that durable knowledge depends less on the medium, but much more on the system around it, on the system on which it is built. This part I'm saying, I really hope that you take it with you, because it will keep coming. You will see the first season, the second season, the third season, it will keep coming. The system on which things are built, be it writing, be it speaking, the way, the form, the type of speaking, the type of writing, anything that humans do, they do it around a system. And if the system persists or is preserved, whatever they have built around it might also be preserved, be preserved, not always, but it can be, most likely. But if the system disappears at some point or is destroyed, everything that was also built around it might also disappear. So it is very important here. First of all, let's keep here writing and language. These forms, they persist, they are preserved, not because of the medium being in this case writing or the oral communication language, but much more on the system on which they are built. So with that being said, let us just jump right into a pause. I suggest we have a small break in which we can enjoy a music piece again, and in case you like it and you're like, okay, I would like to listen to us to some more, please follow the link in the bio, completely free, no subscription at all, not even give your email address or your nickname, no, nothing. Just click on the link, enjoy the music, reflect, and let's say that hopefully this content can be some of some sort of help or addition to you. And after that music piece, then we come back to close this episode. Thank you very much, and see you or talking to you in a bit. Bye.
I kept it in my mouth like a coin too cold to spend. You said say it clean, so I said it once again. The first shape changes when hands keep passing it along. sat on the edge still tells me where it went wrong. Soft then corrective, then softer still. We learn the line by bending to it. Form of memory, hold it with me. Men and women sing, but the ears can't keep. Form of memory, tell it gently, hold it with me. Truth stays when we breathe. A name on paper fades, but the mouth remembers weight. Every careful answer is a door that learns to wait. What was taken from us comes back in borrowed keys. In a house of echoes, we keep the shape of these. Soft then corrective, and softer still. We learn the line by bending. Is not simply the history of writing. It is the history of where societies choose to locate memory in bodies, in landscapes, in objects, in archives, and how that choice quietly but decisively reorganizes authority, legitimacy, and participation. Memory is never placeless. Where it lives determines who must carry it, who may check it, and who is authorized to speak on its behalf. In oral systems, memory lives in trained bodies and disciplined voices. Knowledge is not stored. It is enacted. Precision is achieved through repetition, redundancy, and public exposure to error. Authority belongs to those who can perform without fracture. Continuity depends on apprenticeship, lineage, and custodianship. Here, memory is exclusive by design. Access is narrow, responsibility is total, and forgetting is not a private lapse, but a social failure. Hierarchy is not abstract, it is inscribed in flesh. With proto-writing, memory detaches from the body. Tokens, tallies, and bullae do not narrate, they classify. Grain becomes countable, livestock auditable, labor divisible. The world is reorganized into units before it is described in sentences. Enumeration precedes narrative. Administration precedes literature. Writing begins not as expression, but as control made durable. With early scripts, lists thicken into archives, and archives solidify into institutions. Writing stabilizes rituals, hardens administration, and formalizes expertise across generations. Schools emerge to reproduce competence. Sign lists and canons anchor memory beyond any single lifespan. Authority acquires a material spine. Memory no longer relies solely on living transmission. It inhabits tablets, walls, and scrolls that outlast their makers. Metrology is not technical background. It is governance. The measurement of grain, land, and time makes societies legible. Sexagesimal systems, tables, and place value computation render economies calculable and administrations auditable. Power spreads through numbers. Rations allocated, fields surveyed, taxes assessed. This is abstraction with consequence. Numbers do not merely record reality. They reorganize direct. Once administration stabilizes, codification projects norms into durable public memory. Hammurabi's stele does not invent law, it publishes sovereignty. 282 laws, framed by divine authority, declare that justice itself has become a text. The law enters the archive and then the classroom. Dispute does not disappear, It acquires an afterlife in copies, commentaries, and instruction. States pursue uniformity of scripts, measures, forms, but uniformity is never instantaneous. Policy announces, practice negotiates. Chine's small seal script is promulgated, yet manuscripts and inscriptions reveal gradual, uneven adoption. Standardization is always an aspiration. Legibility is a project, never a fait accompli. On screen, carved seals dissolve into bamboo slips. A map pulses from center to periphery as forms diffuse. With the alphabet, the system compresses. Fewer signs, clear mappings. Learnability rises. With vowelization and primers, thresholds fall. Reading and writing extend beyond palace and temple toward broader publics. Discourse multiplies. Commentary, argument, correspondence. The cognitive sciences confirm what history shows. Alphabet knowledge plus phonemic awareness dramatically accelerate acquisition. With that being said, thank you very much for your attention today. Hopefully this can help. Over to you, Nellie.
Thank you so much for closing. And now I'm here to close the closing section again. Okay, all right. Now that we are really closing the today's episode, I would really like to thank you all for listening, for staying with us through this episode, and for engaging with the ideas that we explore here. And to those who are joining for the very first time, you are warmly welcome. I am so glad and thankful that you found your way here. If you would like to go deeper into today's topic, I invite you to listen to the audio version of this episode, which expands more fully on several points we could only touch on here. And you can find the audio version as usual on Spotify, on Apple, on Amazon, on iRadio as well. You will also find another, like the same video for the one who maybe prefer to be on Rumble. You will find the same episode, the video version, this one, exactly the same on Rumble as well. So you can refer maybe to someone who rather would watch their content on Rumble. You will also find a written article on my social media pages, not all of them, but on X for sure, and also on LinkedIn for those who are on LinkedIn. The article is basically the same topic, let's say in a written form, and also a little bit more expanded and detailed. In the next episode, Exactly. So, in the next episode, we will be deep diving into the psychology of communication and identity, aka how language shapes our thought, our group cohesion, our social stratification, cognitive framing, and personal versus collective identity. I know it sounds a little bit like, okay, this is a lot of schooling, but I promise you, I will do my best so that it doesn't sound or it doesn't feel that much heavy schooling, but rather entertaining. But it is really one of these topics that you realize that understanding it will help you. Understanding it will help you to communicate better with yourself and also with the one around you. So I can only warmly invite you to come next week and listen to that content, to read the piece of it on a written article, or to listen to the audio version of it, because it is very important, it is very interesting, but also needed, I would say, or I would argue, in our daily life. And I would like to also mention again that this podcast is not our focus. We are not doing psychology. We are not doing civilizational analysis. The focus of this project is talking about the new cultures that have emerged and taking shape in us, in our society, in around us, almost everywhere, some sort of global culture, new culture. But the thing is, before we talk about the new culture, before we can start analyzing and talking and discussing about those new phenomenon, I think, or I would suggest, it is really important to go back, a step back, go back in history, go back in the situation that happened in the previous centuries, etc., and understand what has unfolded there that opened the door, widely or not so wide, to those new cultures, those new events we are experiencing today. Because if we keep looking only at 5 years ago, we keep looking maybe only a few weeks ago, I saw this on social media and this is that and that, we might really lose, or we might miss a lot of things that are actually the very much reason or the basis as to why some certain situations, certain phenomenon are taking shape nowadays. So what we do, or what I do, is that throughout the month I try to explain those background. I try to explain the civilizational that is maybe related to it. I try to look into the social. I try to look into psychology, sociology, history, everything that can basically help me to add an additional argument or explanation to that new culture. And then at the end of the month, I therefore present that new culture. So the focus is really the new culture, and that focus you get it at the end of the month. Hoping that you have listened a little bit into the previous episode, so that by the time I come in and say, hey, have you noticed this phenomenon that is happening to us, you have some sort of background knowledge as to what I am talking about. So yes, that's again just for reminders for the one who are new here. The focus is new culture, but before we get to the new culture, we might need to understand the way that brought us here. So I invite you warmly again for the next episode next week. All three forms: audio, visual, and written article. And hopefully you will stick with me at least for the first time until the end of the month, where I hopefully will present you that new culture. So with that being said, if you have thought, reflection, or critique, I truly encourage you to share them, because your feedback matters and your perspective helps me sharpen this work, this project. And if this episode resonated with you as well, you can support us, you can support me by liking, by subscribing, and by leaving a comment wherever you listen. Until the next episode, I wish you clarity, I wish you steadiness. I wish you research. Try to understand. It is not an easy task, but let's say that it's not a multiple choice question either. So either we understand and we try to navigate through it, or we don't understand and we are completely overwhelmed. So I also wish you a good continuation. Please do take care of you. Take care of your the people around you, the people you care about. And thank you once again for being here. And also, just by the way, like throughout this creative project, or I don't even know how to call it, like throughout this project, I have also came to kind of try to express the ideas in form of music. So I, from time to time, when I have loose time, create music, but with help of AI, please. It is not me singing. Singing is the last thing I would do, because I really can't sing. But let's say we have AI. AI is no longer going away, so I use it. I form the lyrics. I write them based on the topic we have here, and then I take this lyric. I use one or two AI tool, and I create some sort of music background or music I share with you here. In case this is also something you might be interested in, please follow the links in the bio. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your support, and hopefully also you can take something with you. Wish you a very nice week ahead, and talk to you next time. Bye.
We walk through shadows that keep on shifting. With dreams that linger just out of reach. Each moment feels like a new beginning. Lessons learned, but seldom teach. In the silence, hear the heart calling. Every step